Hi, everyone, and welcome to the information session for the 2025 Conference Call for Proposals. Dance USA is really excited to have you here this evening. My name is Crystal Collins. I am the Leadership and Learning Specialist at Dance USA. I use they and she pronouns. I am a brown-skinned Black American non-binary person wearing a green turtleneck. You can see me from the chest up. And behind me is a blurred Zoom background screen. Thank you to Interpreter Now for providing ASL interpretation. To adjust your closed captioning, you can navigate to the meeting controls toolbar and click the show captions icon. Again, we're really excited that you are joining us this evening. And for some Dance USA updates, if you haven't been able to check out our impact report, please head to www.danceusa.org to find that very pivotal and important and exciting report. So immediately following this session, I will put a link in the chat for a very short feedback survey. This will ensure that your ideas of the dance ecosystem are accurately represented by Dance USA, especially in our programming and events. So I thank you in advance for your feedback. Now I would love to present to you our 2025 National Conference guest curator, Michele Kumi Baer.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Hey, y'all, this is Michele Kumi Baer on the mic. I use she and they pronouns. For a bit of a visual description of me, I am a light golden-skinned mixed East Asian woman with about collarbone length dark hair with copper highlights at the bottom. I'm also wearing green today. Crystal and I coordinated a little bit on the fits. Kind of suggestion of foliage pattern on my graphic top today, and I'm sitting in front of two Dance Africa posters by my window in my home on Tongvaland, also currently referred to as Los Angeles. I'm really delighted to, one, to have received the invite from Kelly Aduse to serve in this role as a guest curator for the conference next year, and two, to be able to have the opportunity to connect with all of you who've decided to join us here today with interest in presenting a breakout session next year. We'll talk a bit today about the process heading into a final breakout session program. And with that, I'd like to move into our desired outcomes for this time together. I'm going to quickly check the chat just to see if anything came in form of a request. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move us into the next slide and share a little bit about desired outcomes. So when I connected with the Dance USA team about today, some things emerged as priorities for how we spend this hour together. To one, give you all, who I see as potential conference presenters, clarity. And clarity on two things. One, how to apply to present at the conference. Crystal will talk through that in just a few moments. And two, how to submit a strong session proposal with learnings from the process last year for the Atlanta conference. And then finally, we plan to have time for you all to bring your questions, whether you want to name those questions on the mic or in the chat. We'll have a forum with Crystal and myself after we spend some time presenting to you all these two things, just to tell us what's on your minds, ask your questions, get some answers. And so with that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Crystal. We did some intros already, actually. Crystal, did you want to name anything else before we get into how to apply?
No, nothing for me.
This is Michele on the mic again. I will name that I have other roles in the field of dance. Some of us have gotten to know one another, whether through the consulting work I do or the advocacy work that I do, or whether you've been my dance teacher or choreographer or fellow performer. So I'm just really delighted to be able to serve the dance field in this way. And I'll talk a little bit more about the curator role when we get to tips for submitting your proposals in just a few moments. So I'm going to stop sharing slides so that Crystal can share the call for proposals from their computer.
Thank you. Right. So I'm just going to go very logistically through how to apply for for the conference. So I put the form in the form link in the chat. And so this is what will pop up. Here you'll see just some preliminary information, reminder that the conference is happening in Chicago, Illinois, June 17th through 20th, 2025. So you'll get to read a little bit about what we're looking for. Deadline for submission is April 19th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And decisions will occur over a rolling basis, but everyone should know by August 31st. And so again, it goes through a little bit more information. And then here you'll see some demographic information. And we're really just capturing this information to, one, find out who is applying, and to fill any, one, to make sure that our programming is robust and reflective of the larger national dance ecosystem. So you'll go through all of that information and fill out, and then here, session information, which Michele will get more, we'll go through this more and kind of parse through this information. Again, this is just getting more specific about some content considerations, speaker considerations, important things to note. I will go over quickly the important things to note. So for successful sessions that include group sessions, panels, anything like that, no more than 4 speakers. We're requesting that there are no more than 4 speakers to allow for deeper conversation. So that does include a moderator. For example, if you had a moderator for your session, that would be one of your 4, and then there would be 3 other speakers. If you yourself are would be one of the speakers, then that would also mean that there would be 3 additional folks that you could invite for this panel or this workshop. If your proposed session moves forward, Dance USA's guest conference curator and the conference programming impact group, which you'll hear a little bit more about later, will work with you to ensure that the title, description, and format are aligned with the overall programmatic vision of the conference. As sessions move forward, Dance USA will provide additional information regarding registration and applicable support for speakers and moderators. Sessions may not be used to sell a consultant's services or products. Sponsorship opportunities are available for this purpose. And then there's some contact information in there about sponsorship opportunities, should you be interested in that. And then you'll go through the rest of the form. I do want to highlight these checkbox questions here. So one of the checkbox questions asks if you'd like your panel presentation or workshop to be considered for Dance USA's virtual programming throughout the calendar year. So as some of you may know, Dance USA presents virtual programming throughout our fiscal year. And so this is just asking if your proposal was not chosen to be a part of the 2025 slate of conference breakout sessions, if you would be interested in your proposal being considered for virtual programming that happens throughout our year. And then the second checkbox is asking if you would like your panel presentation or workshop to be considered for the Chicago-centric programming track. So this is something new that we are testing out for our 2025 conference year. And we are piloting a Chicago-centric track a track that features sessions that explicitly benefit Chicago-based dance makers and cultural workers. So these sessions can range in topic, but the ultimate goal is that they benefit the Chicago dance community in some way. So these are completely optional. You can check them if you would like your session to be considered. Regardless of if you check these boxes or not, all sessions will be scored with the same metrics. And then you'll just go through and fill out the rest of the form. And that is about it. Are there any things that are coming up for folks? Feel free to put it in the chat, or say it out loud specifically about the logistics of getting onto the form and applying. Lovely. If things come up, definitely please let us know in the chat and I'll hand it back to Michele.
Thanks, Crystal, and thanks everyone again for being here. So my section talking with you all right now is going to be focused on some tips for getting your proposal submissions together. My hunch is that a lot of you on the call here today now already have an idea for what your breakout session might be, and that some of you might be at the very beginning stages of thinking about presenting at the conference next year. Want to center in on a question that's in the call for proposals that Crystal just shared. And I think it's a question that kind of sits at the initial stages of getting a session proposal together. And it's, what seeds do you want to plant with your colleagues next year? That's really the question here. What are you eager to bring that feels relevant, timely, urgent, long overlooked? Insert any other adjectives here. So that you can have an experience at the conference where you're building momentum towards long-term transformational change in the dance field. That's really the question that animates this call for proposals, and I hope that it also activates some thinking and some inspiration amongst you all for the kinds of things that you want to propose to the conference programming impact group. So I just named a group of folks that are going to be pivotal to the development of the breakout session program for the conference next year. And let me get a bit more into the process, the who, the how, and the when around it. Crystal mentioned a few of these details, but just to give you a contextual picture for what's happening heading into a conference program being announced. We currently have just recently confirmed 7 dance field leaders who will be a part of Dance USA's Conference Programming and Impact Group. And that is a group panel that will be reading your applications, scoring them, and then collectively coming together in a facilitated process that will be facilitated by yours truly, Michele Kumi Baer, to make decisions about a final suite of breakout sessions that they'll recommend to the Dance USA team as the breakout session program for next year. My role in this is to be a container holder. I come with facilitation praxis, process design praxis, and history of holding different roles in the dance field. I've been both a panel holder and a panelist, so I've had experience with the ways in which diverse groups of folks who might not all agree about something come together around a shared agenda and a shared set of values to make tough decisions together. I'm fully anticipating that there will be way more beautifully crafted, exciting session proposals that will get through your submissions than we have room for in the conference program. And that's why I think Dance USA is experimenting with asking some of you to say, I would be open to offering this session in a different way through virtual programming in partnership with Dance USA. So if you're open to that, really encourage you to check that box that Crystal mentioned earlier in the application. I understand, and Crystal, please shake or nod your head depending on if this is correct or not. We have about 15 or 20 breakout sessions that the CPIG group will be selecting, and I'm getting a nod from Crystal on that. And I believe last year for the Atlanta conference, there were about 150 submissions or 120. Crystal, do you have the number from last year?
Yeah, I believe it was around Ooh, I think it was like 153,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Yeah. So in just a moment, I'll go into some tips on how to submit a strong proposal because I heard a few items from what happened in the process last year. And then we want to share that with you as you get your proposals together. Some other notes on the who, how, and when. Crystal mentioned a few things, these things already. The process with the review that these 7 dance leaders are going to be doing will begin in May. That's when they'll start reading your submissions, scoring them, and getting ready to have a series of conversations over the summer to make final decisions and recommendations. The criteria that are listed in the call for proposals, those 2 sections on content considerations and speaker considerations, are going to inform the review guide and rubric that I'm making for that group. I'm pausing in case there was anything else I wanted to name on this slide. And Crystal already mentioned, everyone will get a notification by the end of the summer, August 31st, on what the CPIG has recommended vis-a-vis your session proposal. So to get into a bit more around this question of how do I put together a strong proposal, the first bullet point here is really from feedback from the CPIG last year, which I believe was the first time that Dance USA has tried this model for the Atlanta conference. And so what I heard from Kelly and Crystal about what last year's CPIG experienced is that the stronger proposals were clearer. They were clear about what the session was about, who it was for, why it fit with the criteria, and how they were going to execute the vision of what that proposal was. So the major guidance I think here is to make time and space to get as clear as possible and you can so that uh, on our side, when we're reviewing what you submit, we don't have lingering questions about who the audience is, why you think it's important to bring this topic forward, et cetera. And the next is to look at those considerations and find resonance within them and demonstrate that resonance in your proposal. Those are those 2 sections that Crystal highlighted earlier. I think overall, what I'm noticing from being on the outside looking in, and now I've been invited to be more involved in the conference, is more emphasis on actionable momentum building types of sessions that really build us to a place where people are leaving a session with a skill built, relationships built, something that they can tangibly take away from the session seems to be something that I'm noticing from the outside looking in, Dance USA wanting more and more at the conference. And then this last note is from me because having been in different panel processes, I think something that comes up a lot when groups of people are reading something and trying to make sense of it is a application about a grant project or a breakout session might say that the session is about advancing this goal, but then the design of the session seems a bit disconnected and people are trying to fit apples to oranges. And not to say that we don't like apples and oranges hanging out together, but to make the purpose and the why of your session illuminated in the how of your session. So if you're wanting to advance racial equity for dance artists in LA, but most of your speakers are white folks who don't have experience doing racial equity work in LA, there's a disconnect happening in the proposal that the reviewers might get a little confused by. So really thinking about how to make the purpose and design connect and fit. So that brings us to questions. I'm gonna start looking in the chat in case there's anything I missed. It looks like Crystal's already answering some of the questions
Yes.
we have. So yeah, Crystal, did you want to go through 3 things?
Yeah, so I'll just highlight my responses in the chat for folks watching this on the replay. So ideal content length is 50 minutes, leaving 10 minutes for Q&A, so with a total of 60 minutes. And you can really kind of play within that time, but the maximum time is 60 minutes. There is a theme for the conference. So the conference theme is really centered around this idea of sustainability, not only in our work, but in our practice as artists, as humans on this planet. So that is an area for consideration as you are crafting your proposal. If that theme is in alignment with something you're already talking about, work you're already doing, exciting. If it's not, that's okay too. Whether or not your proposal speaks directly to the theme is truly up to you. Let's see what else is in here. Oh, yes, the conference programming impact group will be made public, so that will be information that the public will have. All presenters do receive an honorarium as well as CPIG members. And reading some more. This question, can a panelist consist of both in-person and virtual attendees? Great question. That I don't have an answer to right now. That is something I can take back to our team. In 2023, all of our sessions were in person. All panelists and speakers were in person. That's how it happened in 2023. That doesn't necessarily mean that's how it has to happen for 2025. But that I will get some clarity and some answers on for you. Okay. All right, reading some more in the chat. Deborah, yes. Does it make sense? Your question is, does it make sense to ask you ahead of time if an idea is appropriate, useful? Yeah, you can actually reach out to, and I'll put it in the chat, nationalconference@danceusa.org if you have kind of a more specific question that you want to ask about your proposal idea. Thank you, Michele. What kinds of supporting material are best to include in the proposal? So there's actually a question in the form that just asks about a draft high-level agenda of how you plan to organize your session. So that's the only supporting material we are asking for. And that looks like that's all from the chat. Anything else coming up for people?
This is Michele on the mic. Crystal, I can't recall if you had said verbally for the recording something about Michael's question about ideal content length. So just want to lift up your response to Michael's question that ideal content length is 15 minutes for your sessions with 10 minutes for Q&A for 60 minutes total. Just wanted to have that on the record too. Thank you. I'm seeing another question from Ipsita. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. I really love a good name pronunciation correction about session criteria. And I think this kind of dovetails with a response I noticed coming up in me when Deborah's question popped into the chat. So the criteria that are listed, and I've got some background noise from my upstairs neighbors. Shout out to all the upstairs neighbors in the room. Yeah, shout out to the downstairs neighbors too. Is that there's those two sets of bullet points, the content considerations and the speaker considerations listed in the proposal. And I think this is Dance USA wanting to be more and more explicit about the kinds of things that we're looking for in your breakout sessions. And for example, one of the bullet points, oh, thank you so much, Crystal, for putting that in the chat, is about proposing something that's relevant, timely, useful, and critical for the dance ecosystem. How many people are on this call right now? Let's say I can't actually see the number in the chat right now. We've got 27 people on the call. 27. So we probably have 27 different responses to that question of what is relevant, timely, useful, and critical for the dance field to be focused on. And I think more important than trying to get the right answer to each of these bullet points is to present your answer to these bullet points to the bullet point around perspectives that have been historically marginalized in the dance field, just lifting up what that means to you and how it's expressed in your application. So Deborah, I don't know if emailing the national conference at danceusa.org email with the question of, is this idea appropriate or useful, is going to be as satisfying as you spending time with your colleagues, getting really super clear on why you think it's appropriate and useful for the conference and for your colleagues in dance. That feels like a more exciting inquiry to me, rather than emailing to ask if you got the question right. And this might be a less satisfying response to hear, but just from the perspective of someone who's going to be facilitating a group of people with their perspectives, interests, sensitivities, biases, both for and against things, right, that have created the inequities we're trying to address in the field of dance. I think it's really important for you all to be clear about your answers to these bullet points and these questions of what is critical, rather, what is timely, what is addressing inequity, et cetera, et cetera. I'm seeing some notes in the chat as I'm talking. Okay.
I'll uplift this question about venue. So the question came in, can you share anything about the venues which will be hosting the sessions? Are there traditional meeting spaces, or are there other kinds of spaces available which might encourage a different flow of energy and conversation? So if you've ever planned an event, I'm sure some of you on here have, or planned a dance production or any sort of other production, you know, just how early the details start to come together. And so we are in that phase of still securing venues for the sessions. What I can say is we do have some traditional meeting space secured, and that meeting space would include chairs, podium, projector screen, mic amplification. So that is something, thank you for highlighting, that is something that while we are looking for other spaces to consider, how might these spaces facilitate different kinds of energy and conversation. So again, we're still in the early stages of that, where we can definitely take that feedback and implement it into our venue selection. Again, there are some traditional meeting space already secured, but there are other venue selections happening.
Are there other questions that folks want to either type into the chat or name on the mic?
Well, it looks like we've done a good job of covering everything.
Oh, I'm seeing Winifred doing some maths. The answer to your question, Winifred, about 10% would be accepted. I don't know if that's the answer, because maybe we'll get 90 session proposals this year. If we're going off the maths from last year, if 150 people submit and only 15 make it into the final program yet, then 10% of proposals will be accepted if that's what we get.
Oh, I did also want to highlight that for the 2023 conference, we did have some movement dance sessions. So there will be, that is taken into consideration in terms of venue selection, that we need spaces where people can move easily and freely.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal, for naming that. I really love that as a part of my conference experience. And I do want to thank Douglas for your earlier question about including virtual presenters. That's something that I'll make sure also to bring up as we move forward in the programming, because it's a way to embody accessibility in this work and in the conference. So really appreciate that. This is Michele on the mic again. If there are no other questions for now, then I'm gonna just click the next slide so you have that email again. And myself and Crystal can stay on for a few more minutes for any other questions that are just starting to emerge, even if first draft form. And we thank you so much for coming today and for later presenting your ideas to us for next year's conference.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. If you have time, fill out that feedback survey that is in the chat. And again, we'll stick around and appreciate you being here with us this evening, and look forward to reading your proposals. Let me stop recording.